Hello there, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. Tonight we drift inward, not into forests or stars, but into the inner universe of the mind itself. Imagine a gentle landscape made not of trees or clouds, but of countless tiny cells quietly passing messages through a network older than your earliest memory. These are neurons, the storytellers of the brain. They shape every thought you think, every sensation you feel, and every memory that settles softly inside you. Before we begin, take a slow breath and simply allow yourself to be here. There is nothing you need to hold on to. Let the day fall away. Let the muscles in your face soften. Let the mind unclench and settle. Like snow drifting into stillness. You are safe and you are welcome here. Inside your brain, millions of neurons are resting in quiet readiness. They glow with potential like tiny lanterns in the dark, waiting for the soft spark of electricity that carries a message from one cell to another. Each time you imagine, remember, or dream, these neurons light up in patterns as natural and beautiful as constellations. Tonight, we will explore this inner realm, where communication happens in whispers of chemistry and light, where thoughts are born, shaped, and released into the quiet of the mind. If you find peace in these slow journeys inward, I invite you to subscribe and settle in with us again. But for now, let your thoughts drift and allow the quiet language of your neurons to guide you gently toward rest. Let's begin. Inside your brain, neurons are never truly silent. Even when you are resting, even when your thoughts feel still, these tiny cells maintain a quiet hum of activity. They keep the heart beating, maintain breathing, regulate body temperature, and support countless unseen tasks. This quiet effort is like the work of caretakers who tend to the body while consciousness sleeps. The neurons never complain or hurry. They simply maintain life in calm, steady patterns, ensuring that you continue moving through the world without needing to manage every function consciously. Every neuron holds a shape that seems almost artistic. It has a central body, extending into branching dendrites, and a long, slender axon that reaches outward like a delicate thread. This form is not random. It is structured with intention, allowing signals to travel efficiently. When you picture a neuron, imagine a small tree of light, with branches receiving signals and a trunk sending them onward. It is as if your brain contains forests of glowing trees, each one exchanging information through silent pulses of energy. When one neuron communicates with another, the message does not travel as a spoken word or a sound, but as an electrical impulse. This impulse moves with gentle timing, hopping from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of the next. The connection between them is a tiny gap called a synapse, where chemical messengers called neurotransmitters float across. It is like passing a note across a small space. Every sensation, memory, and emotion in your life has traveled across millions of these tiny bridges. Neurons adapt to the patterns you repeat. If you practice a skill, think a thought often, or recall a memory repeatedly, the neurons involved strengthen their connections. The path between them grows easier to travel. It is as if the brain lays down a smoother road when it senses you will walk that road frequently. In this way, habits are formed gently and organically. The brain shapes itself in response to your experience, learning your rhythms. During childhood, the brain produces more neurons and connections than it needs. As time passes, it trims unused pathways and strengthens those that are important. This process is like refining a painting. The early strokes are broad and abundant. The later stages are precise and selective. The brain learns not by accumulation alone, but by refinement. Your mind becomes more efficient by gently letting go of what it no longer needs. Some neurons in the brain are responsible for empathy, the ability to feel what others feel. These neurons activate not only when you experience an emotion yourself, but also when you witness it in someone else. They create a kind of resonance between minds, allowing shared understanding. This is why a single expression can move you deeply, or why witnessing kindness or sadness can stir the heart. the brain carries traces of others within it. When you sleep, neurons reorganize your memories. They sift through experiences, deciding what to store, what to release, and how to integrate new knowledge. Sleep is not a shutdown, it is a quiet rearrangement. Like librarians working by lamplight, neurons sort and label the impressions of the day, placing them into the deeper layers of memory. Many things you learn do not settle into understanding until after you have rested. Neurons responsible for sensory information create entire worlds within the mind. You do not hear sound directly. Instead, neurons translate vibrations into auditory experience. You do not see light directly. Neurons interpret wavelengths into color and shape. In essence, your brain creates your perception of reality. The world you experience is always filtered through the mind's interpretation, shaped by neurons translating external signals into internal meaning. Some neurons fire in patterns that reflect not specific thoughts, but moods. These neurons create general states of being calmness, alertness, melancholy, curiosity. These emotional states are like the atmosphere of the mind. You may not think anything specific, yet you feel a certain tone within yourself. This inner weather is influenced by neuronal balance. A slight shift in chemistry can bring tranquility, focus, or emotional softness. And there are neurons that remain with you for your entire life, born before you had language or memory. They have witnessed every stage of your existence. They were there when you took your first breath. They were there the first time you felt love, fear, belonging. These neurons carry your continuity. They hold your identity not as a single fact, but as a lived accumulation. They are the silent witnesses of your being. There are neurons that specialize in recognizing faces. When you see someone you know, your brain lights up with familiarity not because of conscious effort, but because specific neurons have learned the fine map of that face over years. They remember the curve of a smile, the shape of eyes, the tilt of a brow. This recognition happens silently and instantly. You do not have to think about it. These neurons carry emotional meanings as well as visual ones, which is why seeing someone you love feels different from seeing a stranger. The brain ties perception to feeling. Some neurons in the brain allow imagination to function. When you picture something that is not physically present, such as a memory from childhood or a place you have never visited, these neurons create internal images, sounds, and sensations. The brain is capable of simulations so vivid that it can produce emotion from thoughts alone. These neurons enable dreaming, hoping, envisioning. They create landscapes inside the mind that feel as real as the external world. Imagination is not a vague concept, it is a neural event. There are neurons that monitor the position of your body in space. They tell you where your arms and legs are even when your eyes are closed. This sense, called proprioception, is why you can walk in the dark or touch your finger to your nose with ease. These neurons create a quiet awareness of your body's shape and boundary. They maintain a map of your physical form within your brain. It is like a constant whisper of orientation that keeps you balanced and connected to the world. Neurons communicate not only through electricity, but also through chemistry. When a neuron wants to send a message, it releases a specific molecule that crosses the synaptic gap and binds to the next neuron. Different neurotransmitters produce different effects. Some create calmness, others produce alertness. Some carry reward and pleasure. The language of neurons is chemical poetry. Every emotion you feel is a subtle blending of these molecules, shaped by countless microscopic exchanges. There are neurons that respond specifically to pain, serving as guardians of the body. They alert you when something harmful touches you or when a part of your body needs attention. Pain is not punishment, it is information. These neurons speak in signals that demand awareness. They exist to protect you. Even though pain is uncomfortable, the neurons that generate it are acting with purpose, serving your survival. Some neurons act as the brain's archivists. They help record your experiences and anchor them into long-term memory. The details of a day may fade, but the emotional essence remains. Specific people, specific places, specific words become etched into neural pathways. Memory is not stored like a photograph. It is stored like a living impression that evolves with time. These neurons make your personal story possible. Neurons that control movement send signals to muscles with precision and grace. When you reach out to hold a cup or step onto a staircase, millions of microscopic instructions travel from brain to body. These commands are timed perfectly. If the signal were even a fraction too fast or slow, your movement would become clumsy. Instead, the neurons coordinate a quiet choreography that allows your motions to feel natural and intuitive. There are neurons that process language, not just hearing sounds, but understanding meaning. They allow you to recognize words, follow sentences, and communicate your thoughts. These neurons transform vibrations of air into ideas and ideas into speech. They are responsible for inner narration, the voice in your head that comments and reflects. These neurons allow thought to become language and language to become connection. Some neurons specialize in detecting novelty they activate when something new or unexpected happens. They wake the mind from autopilot and bring attention to this moment. These neurons are responsible for curiosity and surprise. They tell the brain, something here is worth noticing. Without them, the world would feel dull and repetitive. They help keep life vibrant and aware. And deep in the brain, there are clusters of neurons that become active when you feel safe and comforted. These neurons release chemicals that soothe distress and create warmth within the chest. They are active during moments of trust, closeness, and peace. Listening to gentle words, sitting beneath trees, resting in a quiet room, these experiences give those neurons a chance to bring calm. They help you feel at home in your own mind. There are neurons that help you recall emotional memories with greater clarity than neutral ones. When something truly matters to you, whether joyful or painful, these neurons mark the experience with a kind of chemical highlight. Later, when you remember it, the feeling returns almost as vividly as the event itself. It is not merely a recollection of facts, it is a reliving of sensation. These neurons tie experience to emotion so that your life is remembered not just as a sequence of events, but as a tapestry of felt meaning. Inside the brain, some neurons fire in rhythmic waves, creating synchronized pulses that pass across whole regions of neural tissue at once. These waves generate brain states such as deep rest, focus, or drowsy calm. During relaxation, these pulses slow down and smooth out, like gentle ripples on still water. When you begin to fall asleep, neurons shift into patterns that gradually lower awareness. Your consciousness floats downward on these waves, drifting into the quiet embrace of sleep. There are neurons that map physical space and help you navigate the world even in the dark. If you close your eyes and walk through a familiar room, these neurons create an inner map that guides you around obstacles. They are the silent cartographers of the mind, drawing invisible plans of every hallway, doorway, and familiar route. These neurons give you a sense of orientation that does not depend on sight. They allow your body to remember space. Some neurons are incredibly patient, firing rarely, saving their activity for important moments. They act like observers, watching silently until a specific pattern occurs. Only then do they activate. These neurons might respond to a certain kind of face, a specific sound, or a rare sensation. They are like guardians of perception, waiting for their exact cue. Because of them, your mind can recognize significance instantly, even before conscious thought arises. During moments of creativity, certain networks of neurons loosen their usual boundaries. Instead of sticking to logical, linear connections, they allow ideas to merge in unexpected ways. Thoughts cross-pollinate, associations widen. The brain temporarily relaxes its usual filtering, allowing imagination to roam freely. This is why creative insights sometimes arise. When the mind is at ease, neurons are allowed to explore without strict supervision. There are neurons that encourage reward and reinforcement. When you learn something successfully or accomplish a task, these neurons release a tiny pulse of satisfaction. It is subtle, but real. That quiet sense of inner reward motivates repetition and learning. Even animals learn through these signals. The system is simple at its core. Useful actions feel good, harmful ones feel unpleasant. Neurons guide behavior through soft internal nudges rather than force. Some neurons are dedicated to pattern recognition. They look for consistency in the world rhythms, shapes, habits. When the brain recognizes a pattern, these neurons activate with satisfaction, as though they have solved a puzzle. This ability allows you to read facial expressions, understand sequences, and predict outcomes. Pattern perception gives the world coherence and helps the mind make sense of experience. Deep within the brainstem, ancient neurons regulate life-sustaining functions that evolved long before human consciousness existed. These neurons govern heartbeat, breathing rhythm, swallowing, blinking, sleep cycles, processes that keep the body alive without effort. You do not need to instruct your heart to beat or your lungs to expand. These neurons carry out these essential tasks with unwavering loyalty. They are the mind's oldest helpers. There are neurons that respond to touch, gentle pressure, temperature, vibration, texture. When fingertips graze a soft surface or a warm cup, these neurons translate the sensation into experience. Touch is a fundamental language of the nervous system. It provides comfort, orientation, and reassurance. These neurons allow you to feel the world intimately, to be anchored in the physical present. And within the brain exists a kind of quiet consensus. Neurons work not as isolated units, but as a vast community. A single neuron's activity matters only in relation to countless others. Thoughts emerge not from one cell, but from thousands working together. Feelings are woven from coordinated signals. Consciousness itself may be the song of these neural networks acting in harmony. You're not the voice of a single cell, but the chorus of many. There are neurons that fire together when you practice gratitude or compassion, and over time these neurons strengthen their connections to one another. The more often you feel appreciation, kindness, or warmth toward others, the more easily these emotional states arise in the future. The brain gently makes these feelings more accessible. Over months or years, this can reshape your emotional tendencies. A person who repeatedly cultivates gentle thoughts unknowingly trains their own neural landscape to lean toward empathy and tranquility. It is not willpower, it is wiring. Some neurons activate when you recall the physical sensation of something, the warmth of sunlight on skin, the pressure of waves against your legs, the embrace of another person. Even when the sensation is not present, these neurons can relive it internally. They recreate feeling from memory. This is why thinking about something comforting can actually bring physical ease. The brain simulates the experience, and the body responds as though it were real. Neurons collapse the distance between memory and sensation. There are neurons involved in forming your sense of self, your identity, as a continuous being through time. These neurons connect past experiences, present awareness, and future expectations into a cohesive narrative. They do not store facts, they store continuity. Because of them, you can think of yourself as the same person from childhood to adulthood, even though your body and mind have changed dramatically. These neurons are the keepers of identity, constantly weaving your life into a story that makes sense to you. Inside your brain, certain neurons fire in a special frequency when you feel calm and safe. This slow, steady rhythm is associated with relaxation, introspection, and emotional softness. It is often present when you're daydreaming, meditating, or simply resting quietly. In contrast to the sharp, fast firing of stress or intense concentration, this gentle rhythm invites the mind to settle. You may not know it consciously, but your neurons are constantly adjusting their tempo to reflect your inner state. Some neurons form networks that remain unchanged for decades, while others reorganize regularly. The stable networks hold deep foundational knowledge language, motor coordination, emotional coping. the flexible networks respond to new learning and adapt quickly. This balance between stability and adaptability allows the brain to remain both grounded and open. The mind stays anchored in what it knows, yet receptive to what is possible. There are neurons that act like gatekeepers, filtering the overwhelming flow of information entering the brain. They decide which signals deserve attention and which can be ignored. Without these gatekeeping neurons, consciousness would drown in sensation. These cells create a quiet prioritization, allowing the mind to focus gently on what matters in each moment. Much of this happens outside awareness. The brain quietly says, "You don't need to notice that. Let it pass." When people experience moments of insight, sudden understanding neurons fire in synchronized bursts that connect previously separate ideas. What felt confusing becomes clear. What was fragmented becomes unified. You might describe it as a light turning on inside the mind. But at the cellular level, it is a moment of coordinated electricity, a brief harmony between neural circuits that creates revelation. Certain neurons respond to rhythm and music in uniquely deep ways. They light up when you hear a melody that resonates with you, especially a song tied to a memory or emotion. These neurons can trigger goosebumps, nostalgia, or tears. They help the brain connect meaning to sound. When a song feels like it takes you somewhere, it is these neurons guiding you along an emotional pathway that was carved through repetition and experience. There are neurons that regulate the boundary between conscious thought and subconscious processing. They act like a soft curtain that separates what reaches awareness from what remains hidden. Much of the brain's activity never crosses into consciousness. It continues silently below the surface. These neurons maintain that boundary, allowing you to experience a focused sense of self while countless processes occur in the background. They shape the interface between the seen and unseen mind. And some neurons in the brain do something remarkable: they rest. They temporarily shut down activity so that other neurons can recover or take over. This rotation of rest happens constantly across the neural network. Even when you're awake, not all neurons are active at once. They work in shifts. Resting neurons regain clarity and sensitivity. They come back online refreshed. This quiet cycling is a natural rhythm of the brain effort followed by renewal. There are neurons that specialize in regulating emotional balance. When something challenging happens, these neurons attempt to moderate distress and maintain stability so that you are not overwhelmed. They gently release calming neurotransmitters to soften the response and restore a sense of inner grounding. These neurons allow a moment of perspective. They create a small space between stimulus and reaction. In that quiet space, the mind can choose how to respond. These neurons are not dramatic. They are steady helpers, always working in the background to keep emotional storms from lasting longer than they must. Within your hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory formation, there are neurons that fire in sequences when you explore or experience something new. Later, during rest or sleep, these same neurons replay those sequences in shorter bursts, rehearsing the event. This internal replay is how memories shift from temporary storage into lasting knowledge. The brain practices experience. Even as you lie still in bed, neurons run through the day's impressions, sorting what will remain and what will gently fade. Learning continues long after awareness has drifted away. Some neurons form what can be described as mental shortcuts, pathways that allow the brain to make efficient judgments quickly. These shortcuts save you from having to analyze every moment in detail. They allow you to recognize danger instantly or sense friendliness without explanation. These pathways are built from repeated exposure and accumulated experience. Over time, they become the brain's silent wisdom. They guide decisions intuitively, often long before words or logic appear. There are neurons that synchronize across both hemispheres of the brain, bridging left and right into cooperative harmony. One side may specialize in structure and logic, the other in emotion and imagery. These connecting neurons create a dialogue between them. They allow sensation to inform reasoning and reasoning to influence feeling. Through this bridge, the brain becomes not two halves but a unified whole. Insight often arises when both sides speak together. When you're deeply relaxed, such as during meditation or moments of quiet presence, neurons associated with self-awareness gently lower their activity. The constant internal narration, the sense of me observing, softens. As that quietness spreads, the boundary between self and world blurs slightly. You feel less like a separate individual and more like part of an unfolding field of experience. This shift brings peace because the mind temporarily releases the burden of self-definition. There are mirror neurons that help you understand others through internal reflection. When you see someone smile, these neurons activate your own smile circuits. When you witness someone in sadness, these neurons echo the emotional pattern internally. This shared neural resonance makes empathy possible. It allows humans to feel with one another rather than simply observe from distance. These neurons create emotional bridges, weaving connection with compassionate understanding. In moments of deep concentration, certain neurons narrow your attentional field, filtering away distraction until only the task remains. Time seems to compress. Awareness becomes focused and clear. The brain enters a state of flow, where actions feel effortless and purposeful. These neurons orchestrate that laser-like attention, guiding your awareness into a smooth channel that moves through activity with grace and precision. Some neurons respond strongly to novelty, but others respond to familiarity. These familiarity neurons fire more intensely when something feels known or comforting, such as returning to a safe place, hearing a loved voice, or touching a familiar texture. They produce a sense of recognition and reassurance. They tell the mind, "This is safe. You belong here." Because of them, the brain draws comfort from continuity. There are neurons that create the feeling of anticipation, that sensation of leaning toward the future. They activate when something meaningful is expected, a meeting, a memory, a reward. These neurons do not wait for the event. They begin responding before the moment arrives. The brain gently prepares the emotional and physical state for what is coming. Anticipation is not just psychological, it is neural preparation. And there are neurons that fall silent when no answer is needed, when the mind finally releases the urge to analyze or process. In moments of surrender, when you simply allow yourself to be, these neurons stop firing altogether. That quiet is the mind's version of rest. It is a state where nothing must be solved and nothing must be done. It is the brain allowing conscious awareness to dissolve peacefully towards sleep. There are neurons that guide the rhythms of sleep and waking. These cells listen to light, temperature, and internal hormonal signals, and they help determine when your mind should stay alert and when it should soften toward rest. As daylight fades, these neurons begin calming neural circuits that keep you attentive, and they gradually invite melatonin into the bloodstream, encouraging the body's systems to lower their energy. They support the slow transition from active engagement to quiet withdrawal. These neurons don't command sleep like a switch. They guide you into it gently, signaling the nervous system that it is safe to release the day, safe to drift inward. Some neurons specialize in anchoring emotional memories, not just the visual details, but the felt quality of moments. They record the warmth in someone's voice, the softness in a gesture, the sense of belonging you felt in a certain place. Later, when a similar emotion arises, these neurons awaken that stored sensation, bringing the past into the present. This is why a scent, a tone of music, or a quiet look can summon a vivid feeling. The neurons are not recreating the event, they are restoring its emotional signature, allowing you to feel history inside your own body. There are neurons connected directly to your heartbeat through the vagus nerve, and they monitor the state of the body constantly. When the heart slows and breathing grows deeper, these neurons signal to the brain that conditions are calm and safe. In return, the brain lowers stress responses further, creating a reinforcing loop of relaxation. This connection between brain and heart is not symbolic, it is literal. The neurons in this pathway help transform physical quiet into emotional calm, and emotional calm into physical quiet, binding mind and body into a single soothing rhythm. Certain neurons help you recognize patterns in the world, the repeating structure of experience. They notice similarities between situations and group them into concepts, allowing you to learn from fewer examples. Through them, the brain begins to see structure within apparent randomness. They might learn that kindness attracts kindness, that caution prevents harm, or that repetition leads to mastery. These neurons allow the world to become intelligible, turning chaos into gentle order. With time, this pattern recognition becomes intuition, a sense of knowing without effort. There are neurons devoted to visual imagination, and when you remember a face or picture a scene, these neurons reconstruct shapes, textures, and spatial relationships. They can summon entire landscapes within the mind's interior space. Forests that never existed, cities you've never walked, skies you've only dreamed. These neurons allow consciousness to project imagery inward as vividly as outward. They transform the brain into a theatre of vision. Imagination is simply these neurons painting experience on an inner horizon that no eye can see. Deep in the nervous system, some neurons coordinate with the body's stress system, but not to induce panic, rather to maintain readiness. They stay alert in case danger arises, but during peace they remain quiet. They act like watchmen who don't shout unless necessary. Their role is to preserve survival by remaining vigilant at a low level. When nothing threatens you, you barely notice them. They're guardians that rest until called upon. There are neurons that integrate information from multiple senses, sound, sight, touch, even internal awareness, and combine them into a single coherent moment. You don't hear music separately from seeing the room or feeling your breath. You experience a unified present. These neurons are the weavers of experience. They combine sensory threads into one lived moment. Without them, reality would fragment into isolated signals. With them, consciousness becomes seamless. Some neurons help you understand language not just as sounds, but as meaning, intention, and relational context. They allow you to hear the difference between sincerity and sarcasm, between comfort and threat. These neurons decode emotional tone embedded in speech. This gives words texture. It gives conversation depth. In a sense, these neurons help you listen not only to what is spoken, but to how it is carried in breath and cadence. There are neurons that respond to silence itself. They grow active when external stimulation fades. In the absence of noise, their activity increases slightly, allowing the brain to orient toward inner sensation rather than outer interruption. These neurons allow quiet to feel full rather than empty. They turn silence into presence, giving stillness a voice. And some neurons form the threshold of dreaming, activating as the waking mind dissolves and the subconscious rises. They guide the transition into the dream state, loosening logical boundaries and allowing images and memories to blend freely. These neurons open the gate into the fluid world of night imagination, where time bends and emotion writes the script. They carry the mind from waking thought into drifting story, and in doing so, they help the body surrender to sleep. There are neurons that gently monitor the balance of chemicals in the brain, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, and others, and they adjust their firing in response. They do not create emotion directly, but they create the conditions in which emotions can rise or fade. When the brain leans towards stress, these neurons encourage the release of calming chemistry. When the brain is drifting toward fatigue, they support alertness. They are like quiet caretakers, constantly maintaining equilibrium behind the scenes so that the mind never drifts too far from safety or stability. They are the unseen stewards of your mood, allowing joy to settle, sadness to soften, and neutrality to feel weightless. Some neurons are tuned to detect changes in internal body state, hunger, fullness, warmth, cold, tension, ease. They gather signals from the organs and muscles and return these messages to the brain. Because of them, you know when you need food or rest or hydration or stretch. They help create the feeling of embodiment, the sense that you are inside a living system with needs that matter. These neurons connect the quiet messages from your stomach, your lungs, your skin, and your muscles into conscious awareness. They remind you that the body speaks softly, continuously, and that the brain always listens. There are neurons that help create the experience of time, not through clocks or logic, but through memory spacing and expectation. They fire in patterns that help you sense duration, whether a moment feels quick or drawn out. Sometimes time feels heavy and slow. Other times it passes like a feather floating on air. It is not reality that changes. It is the interpretive rhythm of these neurons. They regulate your temporal perception, shaping whether a minute feels like a breath or an eternity. This is why moments of waiting feel longer, and moments of delight feel brief. The mind stretches or compresses experience through neural pacing. In the emotional centers of the brain, there exist neurons that respond to social warmth, eye contact, gentle touch, shared laughter, cooperation. When these signals are present, the neurons encourage the release of oxytocin, the bonding chemical. This makes connection feel reassuring and real. It deepens trust. It strengthens companionship. These neurons participate in one of the most ancient biological instincts, the instinct to feel safe with others. They help loneliness ease and belonging settle. Human intimacy, at its core, is neural resonance. Some neurons are dedicated to protecting you from overstimulation. When the world grows noisy or overwhelming, they help dampen sensory intensity, lowering the volume of input. They act as a filter, gradually muffling what might otherwise feel intrusive bright lights, loud sounds, crowded environments. These neurons are why you can acclimate to environments after minutes or hours. The brain softens sensation until it becomes manageable. They give you room to breathe in a world that sometimes pushes too hard. There are neurons that support creativity not by generating ideas, but by loosening associations. They allow unusual connections to form, linking memory to imagination, sensation to symbol, emotion to metaphor. Through them, the brain stops thinking in a straight line and begins thinking in branching lattices. This is when art appears, or intuition strikes, or inspiration floats upward through the quiet. They are responsible for the spark that feels like it came from nowhere. Creativity is not the sudden arrival of brilliance, it is the natural result of neurons allowing the mind to wander freely. Deep in the brainstem, some neurons keep you alive without any conscious effort. They regulate breathing, heartbeat, swallowing, and reflexes. You do not need to remember to inhale. You do not need to decide to keep your heart beating. These neurons carry out the silent work of life support. They allow awareness to drift without fear. They run your existence quietly, faithfully, every second of your life, from the moment you are born until the final instant of your living self. They are the unsung foundation of your continued being. There are neurons that store the motor memory of familiar actions: walking, typing, swimming, riding a bicycle. Once a skill is deeply learned, these neurons take over control and reduce the conscious effort required. You no longer need verbal instructions from the mind. The body simply knows. These neurons allow learning to become embodiment. Movement becomes fluid, automatic, graceful. It is intelligence stored in motion rather than thought. Some neurons specialize in detecting emotional expressions on faces: joy, worry, confusion, tension, even in subtle forms. They work continuously, reading micro-expressions and body language. They're the reason you can sense someone's mood without a word being spoken. They help humans understand one another instinctively, sometimes more accurately than conversation would. Emotional perception is not supernatural, it is neural empathy. And there are neurons that fall into quiet synchronization during deep rest. In this state, millions of them breathe together in silent waves of coordinated firing, rising and falling in rhythmic cycles. This pattern reflects a brain that has released vigilance and descended into profound tranquility. During these phases, healing occurs more rapidly, memories settle, and dreaming deepens. It is the mind in a form of cellular meditation. There are neurons that create the sensation of spatial awareness, the quiet understanding of where you are in relation to the space around you. They help you sense the distance between objects, the angle of your body, the width of a doorway, the slope of a path. Even in darkness, these neurons cooperate with inner ear balance and muscle feedback to create a map of your surroundings within your brain. You move through the world with an unconscious grace because these neurons are always doing their work, updating your position gently and continuously. They create a sense of orientation that feels effortless, like knowing where your hand is without looking at it, or sensing the edges of a room just from the way sound moves inside it. Some neurons are involved in humor, laughter, and the gentle spark of amusement. When something strikes you as subtly funny or pleasantly surprising, these neurons light up with a curiosity that is softer than joy but warmer than logic. They detect incongruity, novelty, and light-hearted absurdity. A shared laugh connects individuals across distance and difference more quickly than almost anything else. These neurons allow the relief that laughter brings, a small lift from heaviness, a moment of emotional weightlessness. Laughter is not simply a reaction. It is a neural celebration of harmless unpredictability. There are neurons that function almost like emotional historians. They keep careful track of how experiences relate to one another through time. If many pleasant moments happen in the same environment, these neurons create an emotional imprint of safety and comfort associated with that place. If someone repeatedly shows kindness, the neurons begin firing with anticipatory trust in response to their presence. These emotional historians are the foundation of intuition about relationships. They help you feel at home in certain spaces, feel guarded in others, feel drawn towards some people and away from others. They provide quiet relational memory beyond words. Certain neurons are responsible for regulating sensory boundaries so that you do not feel overwhelmed by constant awareness of your entire body. They dim the sensation of clothing against your skin. They soften the awareness of your own weight on a chair. They reduce the constant feeling of air touching you. Without these neurons, existence would be a flood of sensation. With them, the brain filters most of it away, leaving only what is useful for attention. The body becomes a quiet place to live instead of a noisy sensory chamber. Comfort is created by silence, and these neurons create that silence. Some neurons are involved in courage, not heroic defiance, but the quiet internal readiness to face difficulties. They do this by calming threat-sensitive pathways and strengthening decision-making circuits, tipping the emotional balance towards steady action rather than avoidance. These neurons help a person breathe slowly when afraid, think clearly inside a challenge, and move forward when hesitation would be easier. The courage they create is not loud or aggressive. It is gentle, grounded, and sincere. There are neurons that support forgiveness by weakening the emotional charge of painful memories over time. When you revisit an old hurt, these neurons allow the associated emotional intensity to fade gradually. The memory remains, but the sting softens. This fading is not a failure to remember. It is a healing function of the brain. These neurons allow emotional wounds to become scars rather than open injuries. They open the possibility for release, for quiet acceptance, for peace with the past. Without them, resentment would last forever. Some neurons are deeply connected to the sense of belonging, the feeling that you are not alone, that you're part of something stable and meaningful. When these neurons are engaged through social presence, shared ritual, or communal experience, they generate a deep internal calm. They reassure the nervous system that isolation has ended. They help you feel like you are part of a larger continuity of life. Humans need belonging as much as they need food or rest. These neurons nourish that need. There are neurons that create the experience of internal narration, a quiet voice in the mind that comments, reflects, remembers, questions. This voice is not consciousness itself, but a companion to it. For some people, it speaks in sentences. For others, it drifts in images or intuitive feelings. These neurons construct the language of thought. They allow the mind to examine itself, to translate experience into meaning. When these neurons quiet down, as in meditation or sleep, the world feels quieter inside. The self becomes softer, less defined, more at rest. Some neurons respond gently to daylight rhythms. They follow the cycle of morning brightness, afternoon fullness, and evening dimness, shaping mood and alertness across the day. They are nature's timekeepers, syncing the brain with the sky. When sunset arrives, their firing changes subtly, encouraging drowsiness. They invite night into the body. These neurons tie your inner world to the outer one, letting the celestial rhythm become a biological rhythm. And finally, in this set, there are neurons that participate in the feeling of acceptance, the quiet yes that arises inside when resistance dissolves. These neurons soften mental tension, helping you stop fighting what cannot be changed. They allow surrender, not as defeat but as relief. Acceptance is not resignation. It is a neural state in which the mind stops pushing against the present moment and settles into it with calm understanding. There are neurons that create your experience of familiarity with your own body, the sense that you live in it and it belongs to you. They continually update a silent map of your hands, feet, skin, and posture. Through them, you feel inhabited not as a visitor inside the body, but as the very presence that fills it. This embodied awareness is why you can close your eyes and still reach for something in the dark, still touch your face without missing. These neurons preserve the continuity between intention and action. You feel like yourself because they maintain the boundary between where you end and the world begins. Some neurons are responsible for regulating your relationship with uncertainty. When the future is unknown or unpredictable, they work to soften the anxious responses, encourage calm coping rather than panic. Instead of insisting on immediate answers, they release chemistry that helps the mind tolerate ambiguity. These neurons invite patience. They create the ability to wait without desperation, to question without spiraling, to exist in the open space between knowledge and mystery. Much of emotional maturity rests on these cells, gently expanding your tolerance for the unknown. There are neurons that keep track of social safety, noticing tone, posture, proximity, and subtle cues from others. They constantly estimate whether the environment is emotionally safe or threatening. When safety is sensed, these neurons allow the body to relax, breathing to deepen, and cognitive clarity to return. When threat is sensed, they prepare quiet caution. Importantly, they learn from experience. A person who's been repeatedly safe in connection develops neurons that anticipate safety. A person who has been frequently harmed forms neurons that anticipate danger. These cells shape the emotional lens through which we view human relationships. Certain neurons specialize in slowing mental activity when you are tired. They dampen excitement and cognitive arousal so that thoughts lose their urgency. This is why late at night, things that felt important earlier now feel trivial and distant. These neurons gradually dissolve the day's sharp edges, lowering internal volume until the mind becomes spacious, soft, and quiet. They escort you gently towards sleep by dimming the lamp of awareness. Some neurons are involved in hope, not fantasy or denial, but the biological capacity to anticipate improvement. They fire when you imagine positive possibilities, when you look forward to something gentle or meaningful. These neurons give endurance during hardship. They keep the nervous system from sinking fully into despair. Hope, in this sense, is not belief in miracles. It is a functional neural mechanism that allows the brain to keep reaching forward even when the present feels heavy. There are neurons that monitor your sense of agency, the feeling that your actions originate from you rather than being imposed by external forces. They help differentiate between movement that you intentionally create and movement caused by outside influence. This distinction allows you to feel like an author of your choices rather than a spectator of them. These neurons grant the mind a sense of authorship, which is essential for dignity and self-worth. They quietly affirm, "This was my doing. I moved this thought. I made this decision." They whisper identity into action. Some neurons form what can be called neural quiet rooms, small networks that reduce overall brain entropy and create tranquility. When these neurons activate, they lower random background firing and promote inner stillness. This is why certain environments naturally quiet the mind. Candlelight, soft rain, silence, the presence of someone calming. The neurons respond by smoothing mental fluctuations until the mind feels like an undisturbed lake. Their work is subtle but profound. They allow peace to accumulate. There are neurons that develop wisdom through lived experience. They do not store facts. They store patterns of understanding. When you learn something slowly over time about human nature, about resilience, about kindness, these neurons compress it into compact emotional knowledge. This wisdom does not require words or explanation. It just exists inside the nervous system as grounded knowing. These neurons allow the brain to reach conclusions that are felt rather than reasoned. Certain neurons create the feeling of inner stability, the sense of being anchored even when the world around you shifts. They maintain equilibrium in your physiological state, easing transitions and buffering turbulence. Because of them, you can walk into unfamiliar spaces and still feel internally steady. They hold the center of the self. They do not shout, they do not rush. They simply keep you balanced, like a stone at the bottom of a river, steady despite the moving current. And there are neurons that become increasingly quiet near the threshold of sleep. Their firing slows until thoughts stretch into long, soft fragments. They no longer push for awareness. Instead, they allow consciousness to dim gently. In this final descent, messages become whisper-thin, and eventually even the whisper dissolves. These neurons guide the brain into surrender, into softness, into darkness where rest begins. There are neurons that form the bridge between emotion and memory. When something touches you deeply, these neurons ensure that the memory becomes more durable. You may not remember the details of the moment, but you remember the feeling, the warmth of kindness, the sting of disappointment, the safety of being held. These neurons help the brain prioritize emotional meaning over factual precision. They preserve the essence rather than the specifics. Because of them, your personal history is stored not as a rigid archive, but as a tapestry of impressions, sensations, and emotional truths. They shape the internal museum of your life, where every memory has a feeling attached. Some neurons create the capacity for stillness inside the mind, not merely the absence of noise, but the presence of quiet. When these cells become active, the brain reduces unnecessary analysis and softens internal chatter. They allow awareness to float rather than grip. In this state, thoughts drift like slow-moving clouds across a wide sky. Nothing presses, nothing insists. This neural stillness is deeply restorative. It gives the brain space to breathe. It is the mental equivalent of laying on your back in a wide meadow, watching silence expand around you. There are neurons that help you experience beauty not as a logical judgment, but as an immediate feeling of resonance or softness. Whether it is the curve of a leaf, the color of a sunset, or the sound of a distant singing, these neurons respond to pattern, harmony, and proportion. They are tuned to recognize subtle balance. This allows beauty to bypass rational thought and enter directly into feeling. These neurons are why aesthetic experiences can heal. When beauty is perceived, stress neurons quiet, calm neurons bloom, and the heart rate loosens. Beauty is not decorative, it is neural nourishment. Certain neurons cultivate the feeling of grounding, the sense that you are connected to your body, to the present moment, and to the earth beneath you. They help restore awareness to physical sensation when the mind becomes lost in abstraction. A deep breath, a hand resting on the chest, bare feet touching soil, these neurons gently tether consciousness back into the now. They remind you that existence begins here, not in imagined futures or receding pasts. Through them, the mind finds its place again. Some neurons help create meaning by linking experiences into narratives. They take separate events and thread them into a coherent arc. This is how the brain turns confusion into understanding. These neurons do not require the story to be perfect or chronological. They simply help the mind see connection where there might otherwise be fracture. Through them, even hardship can become integrated into growth. Even loss can reshape itself into empathy. They help life make sense from within. There are neurons that foster introspection, the ability to reflect gently on your own thoughts, behaviors, and motivations. They help you examine your inner world without judgment or urgency. When you think about who you are and why you feel as you feel, these neurons create the space for that contemplation. They are crucial for self-understanding. Without them, the mind would live only outward. With them, the mind can turn inward and see itself with quiet clarity. Some neurons communicate with the immune system, informing it of stress levels and emotional changes. When the brain experiences prolonged worry or fear, these neurons signal the body to be cautious. When the brain settles into calm and safety, they allow the immune system to relax its defensive posture. This means emotional peace can literally strengthen physical health. The brain and the body are not separate realms. They're a single field of intelligence woven together by neurons. There are neurons that maintain identity across sleep even as dreams dismantle the logic of the waking world. These neurons hold a steady anchor so that when morning comes, your sense of self returns intact. You do not awaken as a stranger. You awaken as yourself with memory restored and continuity preserved. These neurons maintain the quiet thread that spans each night, keeping your psychological structure whole even when consciousness dissolves into the dreaming sea. Some neurons help the brain experience the passage of life. They shift activity gradually as you age, altering perspectives gently. They allow priorities to transform over time. Things that seemed important in youth may become unimportant later, and things once overlooked may grow precious. These neurons help the psyche mature in subtle, quiet ways. They give aging its softness, its depth, its perspective. They allow the mind to transform across decades in a way that feels organic rather than forced. And at the quiet center of it all, there are neurons that enter a state of peaceful synchrony as you fall asleep. One by one, networks dim, activity slows, and eventually the brain becomes a field of coordinated silence. Thought loosens, identity melts, and awareness slips gently into darkness. In that darkness, neurons rest. They recharge, they repair, they prepare to wake again. But for the hours in between, they simply float in neural quiet like lanterns in deep water, glowing only with the faintest pulse of rest. Deep within the quiet tissue of the brain, neurons form patterns of thought that you never consciously notice, weaving and unweaving connections in the background while you breathe, blink, and drift through awareness. Even when you're calm, doing nothing, the brain creates slow waves of internal activity, like a low tide moving across the shore of your mind. This internal hum is the brain gently reorganizing itself, strengthening useful pathways and allowing others to fade, quietly shaping your personality and your inner sense of self without any effort from you at all. As you fall asleep each night, neurons shift into a different mode of communication, moving from sharp signals into slow, rolling pulses of synchronized activity that sweep across the brain like a warm ocean current. This rhythmic pattern helps consolidate memories, taking loose fragments from the day and placing them where they fit, transforming fleeting experience into long-term recollection. While the body rests, the neurons remain softly awake, performing this silent housekeeping that keeps your mind steady and coherent. When you learn something new, tiny changes occur at the junctions between neurons, making the connection easier to access the next time. This strengthening, called long-term potentiation, is like smoothing a path through the forest. At first, the trail is rough, overgrown, uncertain, but each repetition clears it a little more, until eventually it becomes a familiar walkway your thoughts can travel automatically. This is how practice transforms awkward effort into effortless mastery. Many neurons operate like quiet guardians, constantly monitoring vital signals into or the body even when you ignore them. They keep track of heartbeat rhythm, blood oxygen, posture, pain, balance, and the state of your muscles, processing this river of information so that your conscious mind does not have to. These silent circuits protect you without asking for attention, keeping you upright, coordinated, and alive while your thoughts drift elsewhere. Some neurons specialize in sensing patterns in a way that feels almost intelligent, able to detect the rhythm of a voice, the shape of a melody, or the emotional tone of a sentence. They do not understand meaning the way language does, yet they detect familiarity and emotional valence, allowing you to feel comfort in a familiar voice or sadness in a minor chord. These microscopic cells are what allow sound to become feeling. When you think of a person you love, neurons across several regions of the brain activate in a coordinated pattern, recalling their face, their voice, the affection tied to them, and the memories of moments shared. This neural constellation is unique to that person, and no two individuals occupy exactly the same pattern of activity in your mind. In a quiet, literal sense, those you care about live within you as electrochemical signatures that can be revived with nothing more than a thought. Your brain contains special neurons that mirror the actions of others, allowing you to understand movement, intention, and emotion through quiet imitation within your own neural circuitry. If someone yawns, you feel the impulse to yawn. If someone smiles, your neurons echo the pattern of smiling internally. This invisible mimicry is one of the foundations of empathy, letting you feel with others in a way deeper than logic. In times of deep calm or meditation, the brain sometimes slips into a gentle synchronized rhythm known as alpha wave activity, where neurons fire in smooth, slow pulses that mirror a steady breathing pattern. In this state, thought becomes softer, less linear, more expansive, and the distinction between thinking and simply existing begins to blur. Many people describe this as a feeling of peaceful awareness, where the mind is quiet but still awake. There are neurons dedicated purely to orientation in space, helping you understand where you are relative to your surroundings. Even with your eyes closed, these tiny cells keep track of your position, direction, and the location of objects around you using internal cues like balance and motion. They build a silent map in the brain that adjusts with every step, every tilt of the head, every subtle shift of the body. Every memory you cherish, every childhood moment, every sensation of joy, every piece of knowledge exists as a living configuration of neural connections. The memory itself is not stored in a single place, but across a network of neurons that activate together when recalled, like a choir singing in harmony. When you revisit a memory, the same neurons fire in almost the same pattern as when the experience first occurred, allowing you to feel its emotional echo, as though time temporarily softens and lets you visit the past. The signals that neurons carry are not constant. They move in pulses that rise and fall like waves. The neuron does not speak in a single steady stream. It speaks in rhythms. Each impulse has a tiny pause between it and the next, like a gentle heartbeat. A neuron is never frantic, it is steady. Many scientists describe this cadence almost like the tapping of rain, soft, regular, unhurried. When the brain is calm, these neural pulses slow. When it is anxious, they quicken. But your brain knows how to return to the slower rhythm, the resting rhythm, the dream rhythm. There are specialized neurons in your brain whose only purpose is to encourage calm. They release molecules that quiet unnecessary activity, that soften the internal noise. These neurons do not fight or suppress other signals. They simply spread stillness. They help your brain let go of thoughts that do not need attention. They're caretakers of mental silence, guardians of inner peace. When they are active, the mind feels lighter and spacious. This is the biological foundation of tranquility. Neurons do not store memories in a single location, as if in a filing cabinet. Instead, every memory is distributed through many connections, like a pattern of gentle lights glowing in different corners of the brain, a remembered voice, a smell from childhood, the feel of a familiar place. Each is held within a network of neurons that fire together in harmony. Over time, the memory changes. It softens around the edges, but the emotional echo often remains. Memories do not sit in the brain, they live in it. Inside your brain are neurons that never stop replaying soft internal sounds. They're continuously monitoring and predicting the world. If a room is silent, those neurons generate faint signals that mimic sound. This is why silence is never truly silent. There is always a hum deep within the mind, a quiet internal presence. It is not noise, it is simply the brain continuing its conversation with itself, even in stillness. When the brain sleeps, neurons shift into a different mode. They begin a kind of nighttime cleaning. Weaker connections are trimmed, stronger connections are reinforced. The brain tidies the pathways of thought. This is not forced or mechanical, it is gentle and natural, like a slow, sweeping current moving through the neural forest. When you wake up, you're slightly reorganized, slightly renewed, quietly rearranged for clarity. Some neurons communicate using slow chemical messages instead of fast electrical spikes. These signals move gradually, spreading like fog through the neural environment. They do not carry specific information. They carry states of being, calm, alertness, drowsiness, contentment. These chemical flows create the emotional weather of the mind. Thought is built upon mood, and mood is built upon chemistry. Certain neurons are sensitive to light even in people who are blind. These neurons are not used to see images or shapes. They're used to tell the brain whether it is day or night. They help align the inner clock to the outer world. They detect brightness and darkness. Their message is simple. Now is a time to wake. Now is a time to sleep. The body listens. There are neurons that respond specifically to human faces. They become active when you see a familiar expression, even when you only imagine a face in your mind. These neurons give shape to recognition. They anchor the feeling of knowing someone. Their responses are subtle and intimate, proof that the brain is designed for connection, for belonging, for shared presence. When you learn something new, a neuron may form a fresh branch, a tiny filament that reaches toward another cell, growing micrometer by micrometer. The brain adapts by expanding itself. Knowledge is physically real. It changes the architecture of the mind. It leaves fingerprints in neural shape. Every new understanding reshapes the system that produces understanding itself. There are neurons that fire not when you perform an action, but when you watch someone else perform it. They allow you to feel the experience of another person as if it were your own. These are called mirror neurons. They are a foundation for empathy. They help you sense another person's joy, their exhaustion, their sadness, their calm. They create a bridge between minds, a soft, invisible bridge of shared feeling. As our quiet journey through the inner landscape of the brain comes to a gentle close, allow yourself to rest in the understanding that every thought, every feeling, every dream is carried by these silent messengers of light. Neurons do not shout for attention. They work in soft electrical whispers, moving meaning across the vast space within you. They are the quiet architects of your perception, shaping awareness with infinite patience. Your mind is not a storm of chaos. It is an organized constellation of living signals, gently cooperating to create the experience of being you. Even now, as you drift, neurons are easing into their nightly rhythm, slowing their conversation, preparing your inner world for rest. The brain knows how to soothe itself. It knows how to dim the lights of awareness. It knows how to let thought dissolve and feeling become quiet. Tonight, you do not need to think. You do not need to remember or plan. You can allow your neural world to slip into peaceful silence. Sleep is simply the brain's way of returning to equilibrium, and it will take you there, slowly and naturally. If this soft exploration brought you calm or helped your mind settle, I invite you to subscribe, like, or share your thoughts in the comments. It helps others find their way here too, one restful soul at a time. But for now, let your breath grow gentle, let your body rest, let your neurons drift into silence. Good night.